Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Sue Squared. Both Suzanne Strausser, VP of Consulting and Development, and Suzanne Weber-Smatko, Manager of Consulting Services, and they are both here from CORE. Glad you could both be with us.
Glad to be here, X.
Thanks.
So glad to have you both with us. This week is the first in a two-part series on simplifying your QMS. But before we dig into that, let's learn a little bit about our guest, Suzanne and Suzanne. So let's start with Suzanne Strausser.
Sure. Hey, good morning, X.
Good morning.
Yeah, we only hire people named Suzanne.
Yeah.
It's part of the criteria.
Yeah.
I think so. Yes. We have a lot of double names.
We do.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And it's funny because there's a lot of them have both, like we have two Brians, but they're BS.
We have
you
three
guys
Brians, actually.
Three Brians,
Three.
yeah. That are BS. And then we have two SSs. So it's like,
Yeah, double
double initials. Like,
Double
what do we
fun.
do?
It's either same name or same first initial.
Yeah.
So you have like a bunch of JJs or a bunch of Bs or
It's really interesting that way.
Anyway.
But anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, gosh. What have I not said in the past? Well, I'm going to be a grandmother
That's great.
this month.
That's awesome.
That's very exciting.
And we know you love auditing.
I do. I always love auditing.
Mm-hmm. But we're not talking about that today.
I like talking to people.
Well, you wear a lot of hats here, and you wear them all very well, and you do a whole lot and have tons of experience, so that's wonderful. What about you, Suzanne?
Well, like Sue's, what haven't I said? But
Yes.
many years of experience in quality here at CORE for 4 years. And yeah, it's just exciting.
It is
I also
exciting.
like talking to people, but maybe not so much auditing.
Yeah, that was just the oddity about auditing that we were talking to Suzanne. It's like, what do you like? I love auditing.
I love auditing.
What?
Oh,
It's like,
I love
she probably
auditing.
eats liver and onions too.
No. Draw the line there.
I understand that. Well, this is all great, and let's get started. So last week we did talk about overcomplicated QMSs, how they can make you have a stalled QMS or stagnant, and too much documentation being a part of that. And that's where we're going to start today. So from now on, we're going to talk to Suzanne Weber-Smatko as Suzanne and you as Suze. Okay.
That helps.
Thanks for differentiating.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yes. So Suzanne, could you elaborate on how excessive documentation can really get excessive?
Well, you can easily overcomplicate your quality management system by writing a lot of documentation.
Mm-hmm.
The first mistake that people make, especially if you're a new customer going in for certification, is I'm going to need a lot of documentation. I don't have the resources to do it.
Right. And that used to be a thing, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
in older
absolutely.
versions of the standard, there was a whole lot of documentation.
Yeah.
So that can be understood, at least understandable when you're first going in. Doesn't that take a lot of documentation?
Yeah. I mean, there's people get into starting to write procedures for everything. They start writing procedures, for anything, for everything.
Yeah, where to place the waste can.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, the more documentation, and we're going to get into some specifics today, but the more documentation you have, it's the more documentation that you need to control, that you need to review, that you need to manage. And that consumes resources and time, which many, many companies don't have.
Right. And if you have it as part of the standard or what you're documenting, you need to follow it. So
Yeah,
that even makes
you are
more work.
Open for audit on anything you're documenting. That's not
Right.
a reason to not create documents, but still, it's something to think about.
Sure.
More to think about
Yeah.
that can make it bloated.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit more,
Absolutely.
in a little bit more detail of how you can.
Yep.
We can certainly help you make it clear on
Exactly.
how
Yeah.
to simplify.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a good place to start. Now, can you give us some other examples of excessive documentation? We talked about the waste can, where that should go. And maybe that has some validity if you're dealing with this is where our scrap goes and we measure it. So that is a waste can that we need to know where it is and how we're going to manage it, but not the ones that you're throwing your trash in your office specifically.
No, it's a good example.
No, good example. But how can you give us some other examples of excessive documentation?
It really depends on what documentation that you feel that you need is important to the business.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I think there are some examples where people think that they have to document every process. They have to write all different types of procedures. And, basically, if it's sitting in a file somewhere and people are not looking at it and they're not using it, then it's excessive,
So maybe work
right?
documents could be
If it doesn't
one of
give
them.
you value. And I know, we're gonna talk about that detail today, but
But what might some of those documents be?
so I think some good examples are when you start talking about procedures and work instructions. This doesn't mean that we're not going to go out and define the documents that we need.
Correct.
But the standard, I'll use ISO 9001 for example. I'll use AS 9100 for example. ISO 9000 doesn't require any procedures to be written. So there might be people that want to go out there and write a procedure for every single thing or a work instruction for every single thing. Now, work instructions, we can get into a little bit more detail. You can prioritize which work instructions you need because it is leadership's responsibility to provide the resources necessary for somebody to do their job thoroughly, which
Right. Or
could be a
training,
work
or
instruction
training.
on a production area, right?
Right.
Or for training to sustain.
Something new.
Yeah. To improve competencies, make processes repeatable, and things like that. However, the AS 9100 standard requires you to have two, right? Nonconformances, control of nonconformances, and nonconformances and corrective actions. So when you're looking at against the requirement, there's nothing that is required. That's not like, in the years past and years, earlier revisions, that wasn't the case. You were required to have a lot of documentation.
And we're going to talk to a point on
Yeah,
that, how
yeah,
that
yeah,
can
yeah.
affect some of this.
Yeah. But some examples are just, I would say primarily in my experience, you see more procedures and work instructions being written than a company needs to have.
Right.
Yeah,
and we've worked with a number of customers that have so much documentation they'll never use. Sometimes it's obsolete, and sometimes, like Suzanne was saying, they really never needed it in the first place. So work instructions and procedures that they thought they needed for the audit. Sometimes it's kind of a tough exercise to convince people that they don't need this. They'll argue, what if the auditor wants to see it? Well, okay. Forget ISO, we usually say.
Yeah.
Are you using this document in your business? If that was removed from the shop or the shared drive, would anybody notice? And if they do, then maybe you consider putting back that,
Right.
one document, but otherwise archive it.
Yeah.
I can certainly see their point of view too, though, from like, okay, well, we do this, we want to make sure it's there, but it can turn into so much when you're documenting what's really just being a waste of time and resources.
Well, Sue's made a good point. Forget about the standard. You want to document the things that are going to provide value to your business. Everything else just becomes an administrative nightmare and more for you to manage.
Right.
So forget about the standard and really think about what it is that you need.
Gotcha. And with that in mind, how can revisiting the interpretation of the standard and its requirements help simplify your
Yeah, I think
QMS?
that's a really good point because, like we were saying, the standard doesn't say document everything humanly possible. I mean, it really says, if we want to actually quote it, this is 9001. It says the organization's quality management system shall include A, documented information required by this international standard, which is really minimal for 9001, like the scope and there's
Quality
not even
policy,
any
quality
and
policy.
no procedures.
Yeah.
Right.
Or B, documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the quality management system. So that's the key. You always need to go back to effectiveness. If you didn't document something, would your process still be effective in providing the results you intend?
Yeah.
Well, and also it's your choice.
It is
That's
your
the
choice.
beautiful point about ISO 9001. You make that decision as a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And if you were going to have issues because you didn't document something, then okay. If people didn't understand what they're supposed to do because it's not written down or whatever, then great, go ahead and do that. But yeah, like you just said, the important thing, it's up to you.
Yeah.
So not ISO, big ISO, or not your registrar, although they may have suggestions and that's nice and do what you will with that. But
Yeah.
but it's your business.
Yeah.
I think it's a good opportunity to explain the fact that you don't want to do anything for an auditor,
Right.
Yes.
right? You want to do and define things and document things for your business.
So basically, it's effective and it's needed. Those are the two
Yes.
criteria. Stay slim and trim. Now, Suzanne, how can your processes cause overcomplexity?
Well, the cost of the documentation may outstrip the value.
Okay.
It might be written by people who can't write or who don't know the material.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Where you have a engineer writing
engineering.
it,
Yeah.
and then
Nothing
Yeah,
against
that's gonna be the
engineers.
example.
They're great, but,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
they have a place.
Yeah,
we're not saying they
absolutely.
don't. Just
Yep.
Yep. So, they're hard to read, too dry, too terse. Seriously, the writer needs to know who the reader will be and write it so that the audience understands it in order to bring it value. Again, we talked about the engineer. We talked about, the engineers who write the work instructions or the manufacturing engineers who write the work
Yep.
Or
instructions.
if somebody gets an intern, and pulls them in to write.
Yeah, hey, write
instructions.
this procedure.
Yeah,
well,
well-
because we need to give them something to do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, unless they're interviewing and
Right.
getting the feedback from the people who are doing the job or performing the process and getting direct feedback, it's not something where you can sit in an office and put a procedure together and go, okay, everybody follow this.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to bring value. People
Right.
are going to look at it and they're going to go like, this doesn't make any sense. This is not what I'm doing.
Well, and let's we're talking about simplifying it. Let's say that happens, and now you get it on the floor. So it's a document that we're going to look at as a work instruction. And people look at this and go, this doesn't make any sense. Now you have to waste time explaining it. You got to figure it out. You have to revise it after you've gone through,
Yes.
this isn't how it's done. We
Yes.
can't do this. Or let's say you do make changes to it, how you're going to do it based on that. And then you find out that really wasn't a good thing. All of that is making it more cumbersome.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And wasting
Yes.
all of that time, not making it more simple.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, can you demonstrating the process versus documenting it be a better way to handle your processes?
Well, the standard doesn't require you to document the processes again, as we mentioned. However, demonstrating the processes, if you have competent people, you need to have competent people demonstrate the process and provide confidence in the process.
Right.
Right. In order for you to be, when we do audits, we're asking people to demonstrate them.
Right.
We may document processes or key processes at a high level, but basically what we're doing is we're auditing to make sure that the organization, because it would stand right out at you. If you don't have competent people being able to demonstrate this process, then you have a problem with your onboarding. You have a problem with your training.
Right.
Yep.
So what I would say to that is it's more important to be able to demonstrate, but engage. I can't express it enough. Don't let somebody who doesn't do the process or doesn't do the work sit in an office and create your documentation for you. You've got to engage the people who are doing it.
Yeah, and the other side of that too is competence always outweighs documentation and training. So the standard doesn't say you need documents in case you pull somebody off the street who doesn't know your business at all, so that they can follow that process. That's not how it's written. So you rely on the competence of people that you hire,
Right.
and hope that they have a background
Yes.
and are able to work on their own and
Right.
in a nice safe environment. So
Well, and we talked about that competence and training, and some things, you're going to make a judgment. This is a really good person. They might not know how to do X, but they know how to do Y, Z, and they can learn fast. So I'm going to give Joe this person to shadow for a week, and we're good.
yeah.
Sure. And we cover that in a different section of the
Exactly.
standard, but you do bridge the gap between, okay, do I have to have documentation
Right.
versus somebody who's demonstrating it? That's going to fall into another category or another element of the standard with how robust is your onboarding process, right?
Right.
You don't hire somebody and release them to production in 2 days.
So
I'm
that
sorry,
would,
that
that
just
would
doesn't
be
happen.
a good point
Right.
then to make in making it simplified. Don't confuse training, competence, those types of things with documentation.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
correct.
So that would be really cool.
Yes. That's where the interpretation, there's a lot of interpretation or misinterpretation, I should say, when it comes to that topic.
This ends part 1 of Simplifying Your QMS. Please tune in next week for part 2 with Suze and Suzanne. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, customized training, maybe helping you slim down your quality management system, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com, or you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.